Well, I'm so glad that I can be here this day to speak to you about how wonderful I am. I'm a savior to this nation. Just look at the temples and monuments in my honor. The people worship me. Well, if it isn't Texas Congressman and presidential candidate Ron Paul. So good to meet you.
Keep your mouth shut, you murderous monster. You have the blood of thousands upon your hands. An honest man who freed the slaves and saved the Union? Nothing could be further from the truth.
What did I ever do to deserve this treatment?
Maybe the fact that you started an unnecessary war that freed some slaves while enslaving everyone at the cost of over 1 million people ending up dead, wounded, and missing.
What do you mean by enslaving everyone?
If you don't believe in secession, then you believe in slavery, for you are for enslaving people to a government that they want no part of. You freed the slaves, then enslaved them and everyone else to the government. Congratulations, you totalitarian slave master.
But I had to start a war. No previous president had been put into the same predicament that I was in, with states leaving the Union. I had to stop them.
Don't tell me your lies. James Buchanan, your predecessor in the White House, had allowed the first 7 southern states to leave in peace. Although he did not believe they possessed a right of secession, he also did not believe that the federal government had the right to force a seceding state to stay in the Union.
Why not?
Because the Constitution is silent on the question of secession. And the states never delegated to the federal government any power to suppress secession. Therefore, secession remained a reserved right of the states. You ever read the 10th Amendment?
Yes, but I had to destroy the 10th Amendment in order to save the 10th Amendment. Same with the rest of the Constitution.
That kind of stupid government doublethink is why George Orwell wrote the book 1984. If you destroy something, it is destroyed. The federal government is no longer the servant of the states, but their master. If the people had wanted you to become a dictator, they would have given you the power to do so. You are supposed to be the servant of the people, not their master.
How could the people have given me the power in the Constitution to become a dictator during an emergency?
In the Roman Republic, a dictator was a person given sole power for a specific limited period in order to deal with an emergency. The founding fathers knew about this, but still decided to leave it out of the Constitution. Therefore, you don't even deserve to be called a dictator.
But why then do historians rate me the highest?
Because the historians are never asked to rank the presidents based on their adherence to the Constitution, which they swore to uphold, or their commitment to liberty. Besides, the polls take for granted that there exists some objective and non-ideological way to rank the presidents, but there is no such thing. For example, what is good economic management? A socialist historian will say one thing, a capitalist historian another. And most historians are government worshippers.
But I'm the great emancipator.
I think I'm going to throw up. You should be called the great subjugator. I remember President Barack Obama talking about your empty label. I cannot swallow whole the view of Lincoln as the great emancipator. As a law professor and civil rights lawyer, and as an African American, I'm fully aware of his limited views on race. Anyone who actually reads the Emancipation Proclamation knows it was more a military document than a clarion call for justice.
But without me, you would still have slavery.
Tell me another one, Abe. Slavery was phased out in every other country in the world. It is rather unflattering to assume that Americans were so savage that they were the only people for whom a negotiated settlement of the slave issue was simply impossible. And it is unreasonable to suppose that the South could have long withstood the inevitable and overwhelming international moral pressure to which their isolated position would have exposed them.
So how exactly would you have freed the slaves?
The way the British Empire did. Buy the slaves and release them. How much would that cost compared to the enormous cost of fighting the war, not to mention the killing of 600,000 Americans?
But if I had lost, then wouldn't the South have taken over the country and that would have been the end of democracy?
No, the South only wanted to divorce itself from the North, not conquer it. They wanted to do the same thing that the founders did to their own British government. And democracy would have continued to thrive in the two nations. Besides, if the South had been allowed to live in peace, commercial relationships with the South would have continued and expanded. After a number of years, the same reasons that led colonists to form a union in the first place would likely have become more appealing to both sections, and the union would probably have remained.
Why haven't most Americans understood me like you have?
Because they get dumbed down in government schools. The government schools have the pro-government bias. To see for yourself, just look at the ways that different governments explain the same event in their government-approved textbooks. Victor's right, the official history.
Where can I go to learn more about my atrocities?
Do a search for the King Lincoln Archive at LouRockwell.com.
Isn't LouRockwell.com the most read libertarian website in the world?
Yes, LouRockwell.com is the website that I read first thing in the morning.